So let's go ahead and start texturing. The first thing we need to do is we're going to go ahead and export our final mesh to Substance Painter. And don't worry about the mannequin, we're not going to be texturing that, but it's just in the scene for now. So export selection. I'm going to be creating a new folder for this. Also again, if you do want to have the mannequin, it's over at the Patreon. There all the project files will be included. And let's call this meshes. And let's just export it as armor. And actually, let's just make sure that we have a single material assigned. I'm just going to export that again, like that. Now, in case you're following along with the mannequin, or if you're making your own mannequin or body, the way that works is we want to assign different materials. So we're going to assign a new Lambert to this one, assign a new Lambert. Then again, for this one, also make sure you have its own Lambert. So now we have 3 different materials, which means that we will have 3 texture sets. Then you can just go ahead and select all of the meshes, do a file export, and you can turn off groups, and make sure you have materials turned on, and then just export. So now in Substance Painter, let's go File, New, select the template. I'm going to do PBR Metallic Roughness. So that's this one. PBR's Metallic Roughness. Put it to OpenGL and 4K. This is all looking good. And then just select the OBJ we made. Now finally we're going to add our bakes. So just hit add. Then just add your armor bakes. I'll also be adding the ones of the mannequin and whatever. And then just hit OK. So this is going to give us our mesh back. As you can see, since we made 3 materials, we'll have 3 different texture sets. So go ahead and name these armor, boot, and mannequin. Let's organize this a little bit nicer. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and set up our bakes. So we're going to go to texture settings, project. Let's type armor for all our bakes. We're just going one by one and assigning the right maps. Material ID we don't need to assign. Now finally the AO. Just like that. So again, like I said, don't worry about the mannequin. We're going to be focusing on the armor. So next thing is let's go ahead and make this look a little bit more pretty to look at. We'll go to settings. Let's change the environment map to Studio Tomoka. Put the opacity up and put the blur up. Now let's just choose how light we want our background to be. Maybe something like that. Turn on shadows. Either put it to intensive or mid, depending on how good your computer is. Most important, the focal length. Let's put this all the way up to 65. Post effects, and let's do some anti-aliasing and a vignette. And put this up. And all these settings are just to make your painter look a little bit nicer. That's going to be it. So now we're all set up to go. So let's just create a save and get to texturing. So let's start by texturing the armor. Again, like I said, the mannequin, don't worry about it. We're just going to be focusing on the armor. So we're going to start off with a fill layer. Let's go ahead and group this. Let's call this metal. Let's duplicate and call this leather. Now let's do one more called gold. I'm going to hide all of those. Just setting up some basic materials. Let's give this some different colors. Just to organize it. Then let's put the metallic up. So if anything is metallic, put it to 1. If it's not metallic, to 0. Just a roughness. Just be loose about it. We're just creating some base values. Let's also just call this base values. Actually, we don't need to put this in another group. Just call it base values. Let's actually call this base. Let's go ahead and create a mask. Add a black mask. This will be a little bit annoying to select off that. Maybe it's easy with the color selection. It's just like that. The same for leather. Just choose like a basic color and roughness. This doesn't need to be perfect. We're just trying to get a quick blockout. Same for the gold. Let's put this to metallic. Let's look for the right value. Maybe something like that. The masks are a little messy, so we can do filter, blur, just blur that out a little bit, and put the levels on top. That's looking better. Makes it a little bit less shiny. This is just a really quick way of setting up some quick masks and getting a general idea of the look of our work. So let's go ahead and focus on actually detailing out the materials. So let's start off with metal. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to add some variation. Right now everything has the same color, which looks very boring and unrealistic. So I'm going to drag a HSL, create a new group, and call this variation. We're just going to be making this darker. Now we need to go ahead and choose the blending mode, set this to pass-through, and apply to all channels. Now we do a black mask, fill. Let's do a basic mask. Just going to look between the metal stuff. That one's quite nice. Maybe it's a little bit too much of a pattern. Just a little bit more general. Just like this, we're getting some variation in the color. We also need some variation in the roughness. I'm gonna add a filter and do a contrast. Whenever I want to adjust a color, I like to use HSL. Whenever I do a roughness, a contrast. Just so it's more clear when I see the layer effects. Okay, HSL's color, contrast is roughness. I'm just gonna darken that out as well. Just starting to get a lot of variation already, you can see. I'm gonna go ahead and make the color a little bit less strong. And let's go ahead and put the base value up. Set the roughness a little bit more up. Something like that. We're just gonna rename this. Let's call this darken. Paste it and call this lighten. Now if you want to make the metal look a little bit more interesting, you can go with a little bit of a more interesting pattern for this. Let's put the balance down, just so we have some parts. Now the contrast. For the roughness, let's put this up, so it becomes lighter. And same for the base color, let's put this up instead, so it becomes lighter. You can see this starts to add a pretty cool pattern-like to our metal. We're getting some cool stuff. I do think it's a little bit too big, the size of them. Alt-click the mask to view it. Maybe we can put the tiling down to 2. Maybe a little bit more dirt. Put the balance down a bit. That's not bad. I do think we have a little bit too many. So I'm going to add a fill. Let's choose this one. And then we're going to put this to multiply. And this is just going to take away a little bit. Let's put the contrast up and put the balance down. So you can see we're starting to get rid of some of them. It's pretty nice. I do think I want this to be a little bit less visible. As with the color and the roughness, just so it's more subtle. Something like that. I do think some areas became a little bit too noisy. Like right now we have a lot of noise. It would be nice if we have a few areas of rest, where there isn't so much noise going on. Just bring a little bit more structure into the metal again. So I'm going to do variation, add a black mask, and do a fill. Then what we want to look for is a mask without too much noise, because we want something that's not so noisy. Because otherwise it would defeat the point of trying to reduce noise. So we can just take a look at what we have. Maybe the moisture with a blur. Again, we just want some spots. This is too much. Let's add another fill. Try to look for one that's not too noisy. Maybe clouds too. I'm gonna add this as a multiply. So again, we just want a few spots where there's not so much variation going on. Something like that. Then again, because we don't want it to be so noisy, we're gonna go filter and add a blur. Let's go ahead and invert the mask. Do a levels and click invert. So now these black spots, we're not going to have variation, as you can see. If we disable the mask, see that we're getting some spots with a little bit more structure. Maybe we can mess a little bit with the mask, make the spots a little bit more prominent. If you want, I want to make the mask look a little bit more interesting. Right now we just got this really boring looking blob of nothingness. You can try a filter, maybe a high pass, and look for something that looks more interesting. Looks like we could do something with it. Go through the blending modes, see if something looks interesting. So just adding like some structure to that, which is cool. See if we have anything else that looks interesting. Probably this one. Lodge. Let's go with this one. We're just going to be adding things on top to try to get a more interesting looking mask. So you can see right now it's just very blobby and blurry. Right now it's starting to be a little bit more interesting and a little bit more structural because we got some harsher lines in it. Try to mess with this more. We can do maybe a blur or warp. Let's try a warp. In the end, I'm not quite sure what I want to add to achieve what I want. All I know is that I'm trying to add some structure and make it look more interesting. And at that point, we're just messing with all the effects that we have. And we're trying to look for something that works. Example that again is adding structure, as you can see. And then for example, we could just duplicate the warp, go through the blending modes and see if we can find something interesting. Not finding anything interesting, but this looking quite good. Maybe we can try to make those spots a little bit bigger, so we can come back to our clouds too and just up the balance. That's looking pretty nice. I want to add a little bit more detail to this mask, so we can try a fill. Let's go with a dirt. Just some general dirt is always cool to add some detailing to any mask. Let's add this to screen maybe. Maybe we can make a duplicate. That's a little bit more with those settings. I think these spots are a little bit overkill. So we're just going to tone the intensity down of them. I do want to have some to add a little bit more detailing in those spots that don't have variety. I like those little white spots. I think that's starting to look pretty cool. We got some interesting formation in the metal. I think it would be nice if we could break these big blobs up. Right now they have a very big shape into something a little bit smaller. So for example, if we go back to this, to the blur levels, just kind of looking where we make those blobs. So at the high pass, we're pretty much making those blobs, I would say. So then right above the high pass, we're going to do an add filter and do a blur slope. For this, we can try to break up the silhouette a little bit. Maybe try 10, put intensity up, and start messing with this stuff. See what happens if we go through the blending modes. I think I like it the best at normal. Just gonna try to mess more with the settings. Maybe something like that. That's really starting to break up those blobs. So you can see this is a very simple shape, almost like a cow pattern, got all these simple silhouettes. Now we're just trying to break that up a little bit. It's working a lot better. For example, take a look over here. This looks very soft and blobby. Now that we've broken that up, we're getting a much more natural looking metal with all these sharp little things, and there's a lot more of a metal feel on it. I do think there's a little bit too much of a contrast between the colors. So I think we're just gonna take our mask, do a fill on top, and put this to multiply. Now we can pretty much choose how intense that's gonna be. That's actually not working. When I put it to 1, everything should be white. Just like that. You can see we can tone that down a little bit. Just want to tone down slightly, because I do like what we have. And maybe we go back to darken. We slightly increase the lightness on that. I think that's a pretty interesting looking metal. So really quick before and after. Before adding any variation, it looks very plain and boring. Just adding some variation goes a long way. So now that we're at a pretty okay stage of our metal, I really quickly want to add some effects to our layer stack. I'm going to go above all of our materials and create a fill layer and a group. We're going to call this effects. So the first fill layer, let's call this curve. This is going to be our curvature. So just drag the curve in base color and in roughness. Also we're going to put this to pass through the group. And then our curve fill layer, let's set this to overlay. Right click, apply to all channels. So now we go to our color channel. You do that by hitting C as in channel. When we bring the opacity down to 0, you can see what that does. It brings a little bit of that sculpted detail back into the textures, which is going to give more structure to our texture. So you don't want to go overkill with this, just do this slightly. Maybe let's go with like 40. It's a little bit too much. Maybe 35. Same thing for the roughness. I'm going to put this to a lower value as well. You can see how much detail this is adding to our roughness map. And we also need to put this to pass through the roughness and say apply to all channels. So if we quickly turn this off and on, maybe it's a little bit hard to spot, but you can see we're getting more structure into our texture. Everything becomes a little bit nicer and tighter. Then the second one that we're going to do is a HSL. Let's call this AO. Add a black mask and a fill. Then we're going to take our ambient occlusion and then put a levels on top and invert it. So we have an inverted ambient occlusion, which is basically going to mask out all the areas where we have AO. Now if we go to color, just going to put this down a bit to bring some of that shadow baked into our texture. This is going to add a little bit more depth to our textures. I also like to put the saturation up a little bit whenever we darken stuff. So you can see the difference that's making. Then I'm going to go to the roughness. Let's add another filter. Again, for roughness, I like to use contrast luminous. And this time we put it up. So in the areas with the baked shadows, it's going to be less shiny, which is going to help out. If we take a quick look before and after, you can see how much like that changes the look. It's adding a lot more like depth to it. It's looking a little strange though. That's because of the contrast luminous. We've got to just put it in the roughness. So if we turn that off and on, you can see the depth that's adding. Like pay close attention, for example, to these areas where we have a lot of occlusion going on. You can see that depth just appearing. It's also adding like some nice like depth over here, where one layer of the metal now kind of like pops up better on top of the other one. And then finally, we're going to add a sharpen filter. Let's put this on top and put that way down to like something like 0.3. Take a quick look before and after. This is going to be really hard to see, I think, on the video, but it just makes everything look a little bit nicer and sharp and crisper. So if you take a really quick comparison with effects turned on and off, you can see it will make quite a nice little difference. It's just a good polish to have on top of your materials. And this is like my basic setup. I add this on top of anything I'll have a texture. The curvature AO plus a sharpen. So now let's go ahead and focus back on our metal material. On top of the base, let's create a fill layer. Let's group this. And then we're gonna group this one more time. Top group, let's call this details. Then this, let's call this metal pattern. Then in our fill layer, let's call this detail mask. Now in our detail mask, let's add a black mask, do a fill. Let's just type for metal. Let's go ahead and use this one. Just put it in the fill layer. Alt click the mask to see it. And let's up the tiling a bit. Then I'm gonna go here and say add anchor point. Let's also rename this to detail mask plus height. Now we're gonna alt click the height, so all the other channels are not active. And let's add some height. It's not working. That's because we did apply to all channels on the effects, and we shouldn't do that on height. So what we can do is we can just put the height to 0 on the effects. Let's go back to the height. Let's do a very slight height. I think I like this going outwards. Maybe we can make this a little bit smaller. Maybe we can try 2.5. Maybe 5. Maybe 4. That's looking pretty good. I like it, but I think I would like to have some areas where this is not as pronounced. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna make this into a detail mask again. Then we're gonna get rid of the height. So we don't want anything on here. We just want to define the mask and reference it with an anchor point. Let's create a fill layer. I'm gonna call this height. So add some height, add a black mask and a fill. Now in fill, go to anchor point and just select the anchor point. I'm gonna add some height. And then on top of this, we're gonna go ahead and break that up. Gonna add another fill. Maybe we can just add the same one again and put it to multiply. Really take some of those areas out. Just so it's popping up at some places, as you can see. So now what we're gonna do next is the color. Just gonna take a HSL. And let's go ahead and call this color. Same thing, black mask, fill. And choose our anchor point. So now, if we go ahead and put the lightness down, nothing will happen. If we go to base color, make sure this is all set to pass through. You can see now stuff starts to happen. Probably too much. Maybe something like that. See what happens if we make it lighter instead. I think I prefer it darker. Maybe we can make this a little bit bigger again. I don't think I like this big chunk right in the middle. So we're just gonna offset this. That's better. So the reason why we want to separate the height and the color is so we can mask stuff independently. For example, let's say with the color, I want to go ahead and have more contrast, but I don't want more contrast in the height. For example, if we take levels, we add more contrast here, it becomes super sharp and I don't like it. I like it like this, maybe a little bit more, add some structure. Now, for example, with color, maybe I want this to be like super sharp and contrasted. Probably a bit too much. Maybe like that. So right now we have a color mask and a height map that look pretty different, but they're still following the same details and pattern and structure. So it works. You cannot do that if you try to put everything on one layer using the same exact mask. So doing it this way with an anchor point is really cool. Because if we touch the base mask, it updates everything and everything follows the same like detail more or less, and we can just micro adjust it. The same thing here, I'm just going to duplicate this and call this roughness. Now over here, let's get rid of the HSL. I'm going to do a contrast. Go to roughness. Make sure this on pass through. Something like that. Let's try to really mess with the roughness to try to get a more interesting look. Maybe in this one we can try start off with a blur actually. I'm gonna blur this out a little bit. Then we're gonna go ahead and go through the blending modes to find something that makes it look interesting. That looks pretty interesting. Don't be afraid to just kind of mess around, try different things, and see if you can come up with something that is fun. Probably try something like this. Then let's try to add a high pass. And mess with the blending mode on that. Again, all that we're looking for is something to make it look a little bit more interesting. Maybe something like that. Things becoming a little bit too even when we do the blur. Here we can tone that down a bit. It's looking pretty cool. I do want to have a little bit more breakup in this, because I think this is adding a lot right now. So on top of the fill, let's do another fill. Let's just look for a crunch. Maybe this one. And put this to multiply. The idea is to take stuff away. I think that makes it a little bit too noisy. So we're going to look for something with less noise. I think that works quite well. Yeah, it definitely makes it look better. And let's just go ahead and do a little bit less. I think we're taking away a bit too much. Let's just up the balance. Something like that. So we turn this off and on. You can see we're adding some nice detail. And as soon as we add that like on top of the variation, it starts to look pretty complex, the material. At any point, if you think one of the detailing is too strong, you can just take base color and drag down the whole group and mess with it. To get some fine control. Let's take a look at the roughness. See what happens if we turn that down or up. Something like that maybe. And finally the height you can also tone down if you want. And that's looking pretty good. Now we can add as much detail as we want, as long as it doesn't get too noisy. So what we can do is we can just duplicate the whole group. And maybe we can call this dots. I can type. Now all the way at the detail mask, just go here. We're going to go to our fill layer. We're just going to put dirt. So now all this will automatically update our colors, our roughness and whatever. Now you can see, by not like really doing anything, just by reusing what we have, we get some nice new detail. We're getting some dots. If you want, you can go ahead and adjust the settings and whatever. But I think this is already working for what I have in mind. Although you could argue that having all these extra layers just to add some dots can be a bit overkill. And I do agree. Like, I would say, whenever you have like a more complex detail, like a base pattern, it's nice, or if you want to do another pattern. But if you want to do something simple, you just delete this. We can also just use a fill layer. I'm going to put this in a group and call this dots. And add a black mask to the first one. Let's call this primary. Do a fill. And then we're going to be adding the dirt again. Just the tiling, something like that. Now we don't get as much fine control over everything, but that's okay because it's a very small, subtle detail. This one we don't really care about the look, we just care about adding some information. So first off we add some height, then we can do another filter. We do a HSL. Now this is going to be our color. Go to base color. Make sure this pass through and pass through. We'll probably go with dark spots. So it pops up a little bit more. they're a little bit too big. Maybe something like that. And then finally, let's add some roughness. Again, that's contrast and luminance. Probably want these to be more shiny. Just so we get like some speckles of highlight. Then maybe let's make this more lighter color instead. So more relying on the roughness than the color to have them show up. See, that's a nice little detail. It's got the secondary. Then we're just gonna make the tiling bigger and up the balance and lower the contrast. I was gonna add a fill, maybe a simple clouds. Just have some areas with less spots. Put this to multiply. The idea is to get all these little dots everywhere, just to add some information. Then we have our big primary ones, just to be there everywhere. Just to be at some places that kind of really pop out. Let's add also a tritary. This one's just going to be super, super small, and it's going to be everywhere. Maybe do a tree for this one. Again, you shouldn't really see this. It's just when we get real close to add some information. So let's go to the height. Just pop this down a bit. And I think that's it for the details. So on top of our details, let's add a fill layer. Add a group and call this wear. So over here, we're gonna add like some wear, like scratches and edge damage, whatever, to make the material look more believable and more interesting. Let's go ahead and add a black mask and a fill. Let's look for a mask builder. Alt click it to see it. Now we can just mess with the mask. And take the crunch off. Maybe up the level a bit. Probably take the AO away. Maybe a little bit. All that we're focusing on right now is edge damage. So I want to be working with our curvature. Let's go in here and start messing with this. Just so you know, like when I'm touching these sliders, I don't really know what that's gonna do. We're just touching them and seeing what happens, and we're looking for something interesting. Maybe we can do something like that. That looks quite interesting. Let's start off with this as a base. Alt click it. First things first, I want to add like a little bit more of a breakup. I don't want like the whole edge to be damaged. So we're gonna do a fill. Let's look for a grunge. Could be anything. Just look for something that looks interesting. Maybe this one. And put this to multiply to cut stuff away. The contrast and the balance. Let's mess with the tiling. Let's do something big first. And then put this way down. So we're just starting to take a little bit away. Some areas. I'm gonna duplicate this, Ctrl D. Put the multiply back to 100. Just take some areas away. Maybe something like that. Maybe that's too much. Okay. Now this is not a very interesting looking edge. It's super flat. Let's add some shape. We're just gonna go back all the way, hide everything. On top of this, we're gonna add a filter. Let's do a blur slope. Whenever you want to make the edge look more interesting, just add a blur slope, and that will usually do it. Duplicate it. We're gonna layer multiple ones on top of each other. Just trying to look for something that I like the look of. Just gonna delete it. I'm not getting anything I like. Let's just add it back. Sometimes easy just to start over. Get all the settings, reset it. Maybe something like that. Then let's mess with the blending mode on this one. We're just looking for something that adds more detail to the edge. I think this is quite nice. Makes it look a little bit more complex. Then let's enable the breakup again. Now that we have that set up, we can go back to our mask builder. Just mess with the overall level. See what that does. Something like that. Just get rid of everything except for the height. Then we just add height. That's working quite well. Again, then we do a filter, HSL, for the color. Put this to pass through and pass through. Probably want to go a little bit lighter. And finally, a contrast for the roughness. We definitely want to go lighter again. It's looking good. I think it's a little bit too big. I think we need to take this one, lower the intensity. I think I already want to take a little bit away over here. Can add a new fill. Look for whatever. This one, and put this to multiply. Just take some of these areas away. Something like that. Yeah, it's looking better. Because we just want something subtle on the edges. Turn this off and on. Right now you can see we're getting like some nice damage and wear on those edges. I think it's a little bit too strong, the effect. That's probably the contrast and the color together and the height. Let's just turn everything down a little bit. When the height is sometimes quite difficult to adjust it, it's such a small value. It's easier just to go to the height and adjust the opacity of that. Just something nice and subtle. Something like that. Let's go ahead and add some scratches. So we're just going to be adding a new fill layer. And let's go ahead and call this scratches. Black mask and fill. We're just going to be looking for scratch. Let's go with this one. That's not the one that I like actually. That one, I think. Yep. Crunch, scratches, rough. This one we get a lot of different options. As I'm gonna put this in a layer and call this scratches. We're just gonna be adding a different name, primary or big, whichever one you think is more descriptive. For this one, I don't want to have so many. I just want to have some big ones. Something like that doesn't look bad. Again, let's get rid of everything except for the height. Just add a little bit on the height. Then again, we're going to do a HSL for the color. Then we're going to make the color a little bit more light. Make sure that we put this to pass through. And then let's do the same for the roughness with the contrast. Something like that. And let's just make a duplicate and call this medium. Now we want more scratches, but a little bit smaller ones. Maybe something like that. That's gonna be too much. We can put the balance down a bit. Scratch quantity. That's better. A bit excessive. Then let's do some fine ones. Let's just call this fine. And these, just like the dots like we added earlier, we want them to be barely noticeable. So add a lot and make sure they're nice and small. Let's add a fill, put this to multiply, and any grunge will do. Just to take some of them away. Maybe we can make them a little bit thinner. Let's just add a fill on top, put this to multiply. That way we can control the intensity of them. Just make sure that's very subtle. It's just about adding some detail and information. I think we can put the height down a little bit more. I also think the height of the metal detail is a little bit too much, so let's put that down. So I'm just going to go to the details and put that height down. Also going to go ahead and add a filter and a sharpen, just to try to get that to be a little bit more sharp, the height. As you can see, it looks quite soft and blobby, and I want this to be a little bit harsher. Maybe we can also try a high pass. Yeah, something like that. And I'm just adding a high pass because I do want some height information, but I want this to be very flat. I don't want it to be like roundish, which it is, because we have a lot of different values transitioning into each other. So also add the levels on top, just so we can really mess with that. Maybe something like that. It's probably a little bit too much. I'm going to go ahead and move the sharpen on top and reduce that a bit. It's adding a little bit too much noise when we sharpen it. I'm going to try to see what happens if we take a blur. Something like that, maybe before the levels. Then we can sharpen that again. I think we can put that up again. And that's better. Probably a little bit too sharp. Put that down a bit. So now instead of like the surface kind of bumping up, we just get a more clean looking metal. And we got some nice detailing on it. Let's go ahead and add some dents. So just like before, let's create a new fill layer. Let's call this Dents. Add a black mask and a fill. And what we want is, imagine like this arm has been hit with blunt force. We need like some areas where it's like denting inwards. And that should be a nice smooth transition. So the first thing that we need to look for is like something with like dots or whatever. Maybe we can just try dots, see what happens. Give that one a try. That maybe works. Up the contrast and change the balance. Not totally sold, but I don't hate it. But I don't think this is gonna work for our case. Maybe we can try a simple dirt and really lower the balance. Up the tiling so it's bigger. Maybe something like that. Just gonna make sure that we just got black and white values. There's a bit too many. Put the balance down. Something like that. Now I want them to be a little bit bigger. You can just do a filter and a blur. Then blur that out. Add the levels. That way we can grow them out. Something like that. That's probably a little bit too big, so let's reduce the blur. So this is going to be our base. Let's take everything away except for the height and push that inwards. So you can see this doesn't look very believing because we don't have a transition. So what we want to do is add another filter and a blur on this. So it's a nice smooth transition. Then we want to make sure that we have a nice strong white spot in there. Seems like we cannot really get it from just messing with the blending mode. Actually, that one might work. I think screen was the best one, probably. This is not bad. This is adding a little bit of that softness around it. So now we just need to smooth this out. I think we can put another blur underneath this. Start off with a bit of a blur already. And we're just gonna duplicate this a few times. That's looking good. Add another blur on top of this. Maybe something like that. That's not looking bad. That's starting to look like dents in the metal. I think they're a little bit too perfect. So let's add a blur slope. Maybe something like that. Then again, another blur on top of this. You can see that's looking a lot more natural. Go ahead and mess with that height. Something like that. Also gonna add a filter and we're gonna do a contrast. I just wanna have a little bit less shine on them. This is gonna help to make them stand out a little bit more. Make sure we're actually on the roughness and pass through. Just slightly. I think we can mess more with the height. I think right now, like, our transition's not strong enough. Like, this is too wide and this is not wide enough. So let's see, what can we do about that? Could probably increase the blur of this one. Maybe not too much. Also want to see what happens if we add a sharpen to this. Again, at any point, feel free to have fun and experiment. That's definitely not the right way to go. Let's get rid of that. See what happens if we add a high pass. Actually looks quite interesting. Let's mess with the blending mode. See if we can come up with something cool. That one works pretty well. Making it feel a little bit more impactful. Definitely need to blur that out a little bit. Let's go ahead and explore the other ones. Yeah, the white's gonna be the best one. We're just gonna add a blur to this again. Lots of blurring. Just so we can get rid of this super harsh transition. Just a very small blur. Something like that. I think that's a little bit too intense, so we can tone that down. That's looking pretty good. What we're also going to do is we're going to add a paint, and we're going to add that above our dirt. Then we're just going to take the basic heart. I'm going to paint stuff away that's on awkward spots. For example, if it's like right at the border, I don't want it. Then we can also start to paint some. Just gonna make a new paint. We can call this remove and add. Let's look for a good size. Maybe like that. You can also go ahead and add some gray. Maybe not, doesn't really work. It's not that gray. Like that looks good. Like this, we can just start to decide where some of these are. I'm just trying to kind of see, like, where does everything look a little boring, and can we use some breakup in the metal? Also try to think of like logical places. Like having one right here doesn't make sense, because it will be protected by, like, imagine a sword or an axe or whatever hitting this. This is what it's gonna hit, because it's sticking out, so it cannot reach here. Maybe something like that. I want to go ahead and make this a little bit more subtle. So what we can do is we can add a fill, put this to multiply. Now we can just control the strength of all of that really easily. Maybe something like that. It's probably a bit too much still. That's pretty nice. I want to go back a little bit into our layer stack, because I think our metal's looking a little bit too messy, like we got too much noise in it. So first thing I'm going to try is to mess with variation. Just go here. I think we're going to keep the variation very subtle. I think we need to go in and take our darken and just tone that down. I think the main problem is the roughness though. It's darkening it a lot. Yeah, it's definitely better. Take our details, I'm going to turn that down as well again. Add a black mask and a fill. And put that to multiply. Actually, at normal, because it's the only thing that we have there. Maybe something like that. That's definitely better. Feels a little bit more realistic. This also kind of like the look what you want to go for. If you want to go for a bit more of an interesting looking armor, this will definitely do. If you want to keep it a little bit more realistic, I would say it's going to be closer to this. I'm just going to go kind of in between, because I'm not aiming for like the most realistic stuff. My main concern is having it look interesting. And I do also think that scratches, now that we have like less noise in the metal, the scratches could pop out a little bit more. And I think mostly the big ones. Maybe not. Let's try the medium ones. Nope. Let's try the small ones. The small ones it is. Let's not do the small ones either. I like how it looks from a distance. If we make them more intense, but from close it gets kinda ugly. What I'm gonna try instead is to do a matte finish on top. Let's just drag one and see. This one definitely no. That one looks quite cool. Matte finishes just messes a little bit with the normals to add some interesting surfacing. Maybe we could do something with that. I'm just adding them one by one and seeing which ones are worth trying. That one's just gonna add more noise. This one could be nice, I think. Let's start off with this one. Let's call this directionality. I think this is a little bit too straight for my liking. What we can try is to do a filter. Put this on the normal and try a warp. Maybe not. It's also applying it to the scratches, maybe a little bit. Sure, like that. You can live with the warp on scratches. Let's turn this way down the intensity. Just want a little bit. Let's get rid of the warp. It's destroying some of the scratches a lot. Sure, like that's looking good. Now, because the UVs are rotated wrong, like they're not all following the same directionality, I'm gonna do two of them. Also, before we do that, actually, let's do a black mask and a fill. Let's go with any crunch will do. Put the contrast all the way up to 1. So we either have black and white, we don't want the gray. I just adjust the tiling. Guess adjusting the tiling breaks it. I'm fine with that. All that I want is like some areas where it's not being applied. And maybe we could try a different one. Let's try clouds. Not quite sure what's happening with the tiling stuff, why that makes it break. Just take a quick look at the normals. That's strange that at 1 it's not doing too much weird stuff. what we're gonna try is just go back a little bit, remove the mask. Let's see what happens if we add this to a group. Then add a black mask and paint. That seems to work well. Maybe it's a bug. Let's try to add a fill. Again, do a clouds too. And up the contrast and the tiling. See if that happens again. See, now it's working perfectly. So I guess that's a little painter bug in my version. We can just fix it by adding it to a group. This way we don't have these lines everywhere. I think that looks kind of repetitive. Something like that. So we can call this directionality. We can call this 1 and 2. Let's go ahead and add a black mask and add a fill. I'm going to do these two. And for 2, we'll do the opposite. Then just rotate it until it's straight. Up the intensity so we can see what we're doing. Probably as straight as we're gonna get it. I'm fine with that. So that was an intensity of 0.08. This is gonna add the metal. This is gonna add a little bit more structure to the metal. So have a look at the other ones. First, let's try the more interesting one. I don't think this one's gonna work out, but we'll see. Kind of works, having it a little bit. Sure, just a little bit. Let's try the next one. That one doesn't do anything. This on top, maybe that works. That's working. This one's pretty cool. It's adding a lot of like a worn look. Let's try the other ones first. I'm gonna start off with this one because this feels like a very generic one that we can just quickly add. Doesn't work, it's gonna replace our lines. So let's not do that one. Maybe it needs to be under the directionality. Okay, that's working. Sure, that's adding some cool little specs. Again, I think this is going to be quite difficult to see on the video, but seems to just be doing it in the roughness. For sure. It looks nice. Let's try the rough one. See if this one's killing our lines as well. And it definitely does. Let's go to normal. What happens if we mess with this? It's keeping the lines. Take a look at this crazy looking armor. Very nice. Probably overlay. Let's go very, very low on the intensity. Sure. That works quite nice. Maybe we can make our dents a little bit more intense. Just gonna go back here, mess with that fill. Just like that. Let's go ahead and add some rust to the metal. Usually when I want to add rust, I just try this one and see how that looks. Usually this gives a pretty cool result. Just seeing if I can find a base that I like. I feel like the metallic is becoming a little bit awkward with this. See if we can fix that by doing levels. Go to metal. Put this to metal. Just get a little bit less of those grays out. Yeah, that definitely works better. Right now we have like all this gradient glow, and right now it's looking nice and tight. Set a blur. Add this to the metal. See what happens. Definitely nope. Let's keep it like that. It's not bad. Mess a little bit more with this. And I know this looks super intense, but we're gonna be masking this out, don't worry. Something like that. Just add a black mask, make sure it's nowhere. I think I want like a general rust like everywhere. I think a good one for this would be moist. Up the contrast and tiling. Start off with something like this. Do one more, put this to multiply. Just rotate it a bit and mess with the values. I'm not a big fan of like that color. See what's actually creating that. Do a fill. Let's just do a color. The color is not a problem. Roughness. Metal. It's definitely the metal. I'll probably just fill it with a metal to fix that. Maybe like a little bit. Something like that. Let's make sure this mask is actually working. Add another moisture on top. Put this to normal for now. Something like that. Up the balance on this. All I'm doing is like trying to look for an interesting mask. It's working quite nicely. Again, there's a lot of rust for now. We're gonna fix this. The main issue right now that I'm having is like all these little bumps, like they bump out a lot. Over here, I'm really liking how that looks. So that's probably the height. Let's just put that down. That's not the height. That must be the normal. Just gonna put that way down. Something like that. Let's go ahead and add like some general rust. At some places we got nothing. Actually, let's do something else. Let's do a dirt. Dirt 2. Maybe dirt 3. Dirt 5. Dirt 5. I'm gonna add this to screen. It's just gonna add like some nice spots of rust. Like that. Now we still have too much. So let's take away again. See if we have a rust one. We do. Let's give that a try. Just put that to multiply. Probably more contrast. Something like that's looking good. Now we're just getting like some spots with rust. Let's add a paint. Now we're just gonna take the dirt brush. I'm gonna be brushing away some of the rust. Put the opacity and flow way down. We can just take it away at areas where we don't like it. And I think that's a pretty good, like, general rust. Now what we're gonna do is let's go ahead and put this in a group. Put this to pass through. That breaks. Apply to all channels. And then let's call this general. Let's duplicate it. Then let's just get rid of all this extra stuff. Let's keep that one. Let's call this big spot. Put this in a group. Pass through. Apply to all. Let's call the group big spot. call this one rust. Because I really like some of the rust is creating. But it's a lot. Now we can just brush that back at some places. Let's go with a different brush. Let's go with basic hard. I'm just trying to find like some interesting spots to have a stronger amount of rust. Don't worry about seeing the transition, we'll fix that in a little bit. Again, we can use the rust to add a little bit of breakup to the metal. If it's looking a little boring in one place, just add a little bit more rust. Something like that is working fine, I think. Now let's go ahead and fix up the mask. Just do a fill, do another fill, I bet. Do a filter, and do a blur slope. Again, whenever we want to create a more interesting silhouette, just add a blur slope to it, and that will do it. Let's duplicate that, put this to 1. You can see now that mask looks perfect. I think it's a little bit too strong at one spot. With that one, we can just brush that away. If we want to control the intensity, just add a fill and put this to multiply. Something like that. I'm gonna go back to our basic. Maybe we can brush away a little bit here. Just to not have that big of a spot there. Now finally, I'm just gonna add one more rust. We're gonna see if we can create something interesting. Again, let's add a fill, just filled with a solid metal. Something like that's looking pretty cool. I like how that adds like some depth in the layering. Let's go with something like that. Just like before, let's add some masks. Let's just start off with a black mask. I'm just kind of looking where that is on the UV. Then we're just going to be painting that back. Put this to UV. Actually, we can probably just do a whole fill. Just fill those up. I do like them on the straps. It's a nice little touch. So I have a few like spots here and there. This is definitely too much. It's just becoming a solid block. It doesn't look really nice. Again, we're not worried about the transition of the mask. You just want to say where it should be. Then we can fix that up. Take some away. Trying to kind of aim for like a dripping shape. Because if we have everything like this, it's going to be a super boring looking effect. Something like that maybe. If we can add like a big spot here. Again, just like before, let's go ahead and fix up that mask. I'm literally just going to copy paste these blur slopes and paste them. Let's go ahead and adjust them so they work for our mask. Not quite sure what that's doing. It's looking pretty cool. Happy little accident. Let's duplicate that. Use this as like general. Call this 2. Hide it for now though. Let's add a warp. Let's do a custom noise. Let's try plasma. Plasma is definitely not the way to go. Let's try moist. That's not bad. Let's add back our happy little accident. So I guess all this is just a gray. Let's just do that ourselves. So we have control of the intensity. Now I also want to take a little bit away because there's a lot. Let's add a fill and do another moist. Then make sure to put this to multiply. And maybe we can add one more fill on top to control the final intensity. It's looking pretty good. Let's add our big rust back. Again, same here, let's add a fill on top, multiply, control that intensity. That's definitely too much. Start off with a fill. Try rust and multiply. Also again, the height thing's happening that I don't like. Let's just go to height. We're gonna kill that. See which one it is. General 2. Actually, it's not the height, it's the normal. Have a little bit. Let's add one more fill. Maybe try simple clouds. And finally, let's just paint away the last areas that we don't like. Now that we have all the rest done, let's do one quick white mask. Now we can just paint all the rust layers together to get rid of some of the last pieces we don't like. This can be a little bit difficult to find the exact layer of that piece of rust. Probably a bit too strong over there. That's looking pretty nice. So I think we're at a good stage with the metal. So let's go ahead and work a little bit on the leather. And we can always come back later. So just like before, we're going to be starting with some variation. Go ahead and add a HSL. Let's call this darken. I'll be going through it a little bit faster as it's pretty much the same thing. Usually I like to use a moisture for leathers. Let's go ahead and adjust the mask a little bit. Let's try to get it to look a little bit more interesting. Again, if we want the mask to look a little bit more interesting, we can always just throw a filter on top and try to mess with the blending modes. Let's try a different one. Let's try clouds. I'm just looking for something that's adding a little bit more everywhere. Maybe we can sharpen this out a little bit. Something like that. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. Call this lighten. and something like that. Let's call this variation. Create a new fill layer and say height. Call this detail mask. Now we're just going to add a ladder here. Let's have a look at the default ones that we have. Let's go with this one. Add the anchor point. Let's go ahead and make the base value a little bit less shiny. Let's try the other one. The other one definitely better. Let's see if I can adjust this mask a little bit, maybe with a high pass. Let's go ahead and add some color. We also need to rename this to details and set this to pastoral. Go ahead and invert the mask so we can choose a color for the cracks. Let's also adjust the levels a bit. And usually the cracks are a little bit more of a lighter color. I think we can also go ahead and add a slight blur to this. Just like that. Now for the roughness, the cracks should be more white. You just go here and copy the mask. And Ctrl-Alt-V to paste. Guess that broke. Now I would recommend that you use a slightly better ladder detail mask. Like if you can find them anywhere online. But just for the sake of you being able to follow along, I don't want to use anything that's not basically in Painter already. You could probably put up the base roughness again. I think I want to add a little bit more variation in the color, so I'm going to do one more. The idea is that this will like make it look that some of the cells get like some spots on them, which works pretty well. It's just going to add a little bit of detail. Maybe we can sharpen that out. Same for the roughness, I just want it to look like some of the cells have some spots. I think in the roughness, like we need a little bit more evenness. So I'm gonna go to roughness, put this to roughness. I'm gonna be messing with the contrast. That's probably the midtones. Yeah, we're just gonna be putting that down. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all this and let's group it together. Let's call this top. I'm going to make a new fill layer. And actually, let's just reuse what we have over here. I'm going to group this together and call this base. Duplicate it, put this down below. This is going to be called bottom. Let's hide the top. Go ahead and get rid of spots. Actually, maybe we keep that. Instead of plasma, we go with dirt. Then we're also going to be adding some height. So we can just do a new fill. Put this to height. Just a little bit. Maybe not. Let's keep the height away. I'm just going to put the HSL on top of this. So I can easily adjust the color. Let's go ahead and re-enable the top. I'm going to do a mask by color selection. I'm going to be masking out the top part of the ladder. I think colors are a little bit too similar. Let's push it up more. Something like that. Let's go ahead and blur this mask out a little bit. So it's a little bit nicer. Add a levels on top. So this just gets rid of like that ugly jackiness. See, it makes a small difference, but it's pretty nice. Now for the bottom, we want a very rough material. Something like that. So we're gonna add a new group to top. Let's call this top wear mask. Add a black mask. Go to edge, a fabric edge. And let's go ahead and invert. This is just gonna add a little bit of edge wear to our stuff. Let's go ahead and adjust the mask. Maybe something like that. I like how it's like capturing some of that stuff. I think it's a little bit too much on the edges though. Keep that a little bit more subtle. Maybe we can add the armor cavity. Mess with the blending mode. So what I'm trying is I'm just trying to add back to the edges. That's actually pretty nice. Although we're losing all this stuff, which is a shame. So what we're gonna do is let's try to get that back. So on top of our top, we're just gonna create a black mask and a fill. Take our fabric edges again. So the goal now is to have everything in black except for those areas. Just gonna go to curvature, put all this texture back down. So let's try something like that, and then we just duplicate this. And what we want to try is to mask out the border. So something like that. And again, our goal is just to try to get some interesting cracks showing up. I think right now we have a bit too much. So maybe we can go here and try to mess with that. Maybe something like that. I think we can also add a sharpen on top. Do a very slight sharpen. And just out of curiosity, let's add a high pass and see what happens. nothing interesting. Go ahead and delete that. So now let's call this wear spots, whatever. I'm gonna add the anchor point. And the reason why we're doing this on a fill layer in between is because we want to add this stuff to our mask, but we don't want this stuff to be added. So we need to go ahead and subtract some parts. But if we were to subtract those parts over here, it would subtract everything that's over here, what we want to keep. So we need to combine the two. So what we can do now, also let's make sure this is all set off. Just care about that mask. Just gonna add a fill and do our wear spot mask. And let's just find the correct mode. That looks about right, difference. See if there's a better one. Let's go with difference. Something like that. Getting a really ugly detail right over here. Let's try ahead and just offset this. That looks better. Let's duplicate this. Actually, let's just create a new layer. Same ID, let's add a black mask and a fill. Actually, I don't think we need to do that. You can just go here and go on top, add fill. I just want to have some scratches. I can never remember which one it is. And it's going to be this one. Put that to difference, just to add some scratches. First, let's work a little bit on the scratches so we can see it more easy. Want a very low amount. Just want to have some scratches here and there. Like that, doesn't look bad. I think the color is a little bit too different now. It feels like a very, very strong outline on it. Before I'm gonna try to adjust the base layer, just wanna go in with a color correct. That's gonna be all the way on top. So let's try to color correct the whole letter as a whole, the bottom and the top. I think first off, push up the contrast, make it look a lot more interesting. Maybe tone down the saturation slightly. Actually, let's put a little bit more up. That definitely looks a lot more interesting. Let's put the HSL on top. Mess a little bit more with that color. And maybe now we can go back to the bottom. Adjust the base. Just gonna put a HSL there. Just so we get some easy fine tuning. Maybe something like that. See if we can mess a little bit with the height. I think maybe the height we can blur it out. Just so it doesn't get as sharp. That's 0.06. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, that's definitely better. Again, super hard to tell, I think, in the compressed video. It just becomes a little bit less of a noisy pixel mess. Let's try one more contrast, one more color correct. Do some final adjustments for the roughness. I feel like we can go ahead and push the color a bit. Something like that. Take a quick look with some other skyboxes. Feel like I'm not getting exactly the shine that I want on the ladder. I think it's also partially just because of the light hitting it. There's also like a part like you'll make the textures and whatever. Then you put it in Marmoset to render or whatever. Then you always go back and forth a little bit with the values. I think for now, let's just go ahead and keep it like this. Because I do like how the channel looks. Now let's go ahead and do the last part, the golden parts. And I think we can just reuse the metal that we have. I'm just gonna try that. Just add metal right here. Looks pretty good. Just delete the old gold. Now what I'm gonna do at the base value, let's add a fill layer. Let's call this gold. Maybe this can be a little bit easier. All the way on top. Create a new group, call this gold. By doing it on the bottom, like it takes a lot more time. Put this to pass through and put this to color. Show in the base color. Maybe value. A hue. Tint. Definitely color. So first, let's just focus on getting it very yellow. So you get those little thingies in. Now that it's very yellow, it's going to be a lot easier to adjust that color with a HSL. Let's put saturation way down. And mess with the hue. And I'm kind of looking for a bronze, I think. Do color correct. This one's going to be for the roughness. I think I want this one to be more shiny. And a little bit less contrast, probably. Something like that. Let's mess more with the color. Try to get a little bit of orange in there. Something like that. Let's go ahead and mess a little bit more with the metal. I want to see if we can add some blue. And let's try to get the balls to be a little bit more interesting. Just go to base values, add a new layer. And put a blue color. Let's go with a very slight opacity. That's definitely too blue. Something like that's starting to look pretty good. The key is to keep this very subtle. Add a black mask and a fill. Let's go with a very boring mask. I just want to have some spots where we're adding a bluish hue. That's just gonna make it look a little bit less boring because we get some color in there. What to do with these little balls? Let's go all the way on top. Do a HSL. And again, let's group this color. Let's call these balls. I don't want to make them more dark or more white. Probably in this case a little bit more white. I think I also want them to be more shiny. A small adjustment, but it just makes them stand out a little bit more. Maybe we can add a little bit more rust to them. Just go to rust. Let's do one final rust. Maybe we can try this one. I'm gonna hide the balls adjustment for now, just so the rust doesn't get like a weird color. Let me check one more time the other one. Yeah, let's go with a more like even one. Black mask. Let's do what we do. Let's do a ambient occlusion first. The idea is that we want to mask around the balls. As with the levels. I think something like that. Plus a blur. Then another levels. Then to top it off, we need to do a color selection. Take those and put it to screen. Now we do need to fix up this mask a little bit. Let's add a paint. So let's do that below the color select. Here we just want to go ahead and deselect everything. And then let's finally paint. We just want to be painting out everything that's not like surrounding it. Let's have a look at that. Like you see, we have a nice mask around our balls. Let's go ahead and maybe keep the metal. Let's keep the metal. Let's go ahead and make this mask look a little bit more interesting. So right now we have like the area where we want rust. I'm gonna go ahead and grow this out a little bit with a blur. And another levels. And let's kill the metal. Just so we don't get like those weird glows. Let's make the color a little bit more light. So again, having a round mask will be really boring. So let's break that up. Just simple blur slope. Do a duplicate. That's a little bit with the settings. Maybe we can mess with the blending mode. So I like this, maybe as a detail. Let's keep that for now as a backup. Let's keep that as normal. And let's turn that, like, you can almost say like an outline on again. Maybe on this one we can go a little bit lighter or darker. Maybe darker. It's probably better without. Let's just delete it. Let's go ahead and add a black mask to the group and a fill. So we don't want it to be everywhere. It's probably a little bit too intense because our other like rust is pretty much like dirt, like it's very black and non-saturated. Let's adjust that. Put saturation down and the lightness. That's better. I just want to turn the rust down over there a little bit. Let's add one more fill. That will be our general, like overall strength. Maybe we can do one final rust. That's going to be at the wear. That's going to be our dents. Let's just go ahead and add the anchor point. So let's use our dents mask. Let's just the levels a little bit. Again, let's push that saturation way down. Make sure the mask is a little bit more chaotic. And finally, let's add a fill and put that to multiply. I just want this to be very, very slightly. Like that. I think that's even a bit too much. Let's go ahead and do a fill, put that to multiply, just to control the intensity of that. Let's turn this back on. It's looking good. Want to do one final rust. Now, I know we're adding a lot of rust, but that's going to make the metal look a lot more interesting. And make sure it's on top of the balls. I want something very, very subtle for this. I just want some extra rust on this. Just gonna add a new group. Everything on pass through. Add a black mask here. Then we're just gonna be painting some areas where we want it back. Just kind of looking which ones make it look interesting. That brush is probably soft. For example, I don't want this one because I think it's way too much. Just looking to add a little bit of rust to some of them, to make them stand out more from the metal plates, by just having like the strongest rust on them. Then over here I want to paint some of that rust also on the metal plate, because it's such a strong rust. It should be continuing into the metal. And we just want to take that away from the actual ball. And finally, let's go ahead and break up the silhouette again a bit. So you can see this adds a lot. This looks really fake. Now the blending makes it look a little bit better. probably a little bit too strong. And yeah, that's going to be it for this series on how to create armor. If you do want to learn more, I'm going to be covering the final part, which is going to be rendering and post-processing in DaVinci and Photoshop over on the Patreon. There will be another video like this, probably will be 2 to 3 hours of just going through my pipeline of rendering. Together with all the project files, such as the Substance Painter file, the ZBrush file, the low poly, whatever, you can all find it on the Patreon. So if you did learn something in this course, consider supporting me over on Patreon. And I hope that you learned a lot following along with this course.